Hey, everybody, this is another episode of Business Uncensored, formerly Small Business Chronicles. You know what? I wanted to curse more, so I changed the name. What we're going to do here on the show is we're going to have a real look at business. Today is about as real as it gets. Legal. I think one of the things in the news right now is legal issues, legal problems, how businesses can get in there, how businesses get out of there. So I think today we're going to do a little bit of legal, disruptive, all those things we're going to talk about today. And so I found a guy to help me talk about those, and that would be Don McLaughlin of the Dream Exit Collective. How are we doing today, Don?
Fantastic, Ryan. Looking forward to our conversation.
I am too, because, you know, there's so many aspects of business. So this is one that really interests me, is because little Ryan, when he was playing with his trucks in the gravel, wanted to be a lawyer, but little Ryan wasn't smart enough. So thank you for coming on the show and helping fill in that legal thing. So before we get started on the old show, one of the things I used to ask all the time is, why should we trust you? And I'm going to reform that a little bit. Why are you an expert, and why did I bring you on here is what I'm really trying to get, because I think we need that setup before we delve into where we're going.
100% agree, Ryan. And I've been a lawyer my entire career, so roughly 25 years. And you started as a government prosecutor, has also served as an intern, as a public defender. So I've seen sort of both sides of the criminal world. And then launched into private practice, and have had a couple of careers since then, both as a lawyer at a large law firm in Denver, Colorado, and then as a corporate lawyer inside a Fortune 500 that was wrapped up in the Enron and Arthur Andersen legal fiasco that took the better part of about 15 years of my life, that had a stint of entrepreneurship in there, a tech and managed service firm that I ran for about 10 years and then successfully sold it. So those are my quick credentials, but there's obviously a lot more to the story than just those highlights.
Of course. So let's start at the beginning, because there's a lot of things that interest me, right? I've always been interested in legal dramas, goes back to watching Night Court with my grandparents, to Law and Order growing up, to more recently Better Call Saul, stuff like that. So as you say, you're a government prosecutor and defense and a public defense attorney or whatever. How crazy is that? Is that... like, you see it portrayed on TV a certain way, you see it looked at it a certain way, even in some documentaries. I guess it kind of depends on the area, but for you personally, how crazy, what was that time in legal?
Yeah, it's I look back on it so fondly. I feel like the most rewarding period for me as a lawyer. I found so many others in that public service line of work, either a public defender or a prosecutor, to be the most fulfilled. Not to say absent stress and anxiety, for sure, because it's a very personal line of the profession, right? You're dealing with people's lives, very directly, their futures. And so, it just found it so gratifying, and yet, for me, the reality of that line of work, it was challenging financially, because going to law school, as anybody that has considered that knows, is a very expensive proposition, as it was for me, to the tune of six figures in law school debt that I knew a salary as a government prosecutor was going to make challenging to also grow a family. So, it was bittersweet for me to step aside from that world and go into private practice.
Are there any cases that just stand out that still haunt you to this day that you went through at that time?
Yes. One that I was very peripherally involved with in the DA's office as a young assistant DA, that I shadowed a case that was being prosecuted and taken to trial. And I sat through a lengthy trial, a several-week trial, of a guy that had been arrested, had served in the Navy and sort of arrested out of the Navy for a murder that had been committed, 15 years earlier, that he was accused of, and the murder took place in the vicinity of where he lived. In northern Colorado, and at the time he would have been a much younger man, it was disturbing in the sense that there appeared to be quite a bit of evidence suggesting that he had committed this crime in the form of pictures that he'd drawn, entries he'd made in journals that eerily mimicked the murder. And the reason it was so disturbing is because the nature of the murder was very violent and very graphic. And yet, it was very circumstantial in many respects, right? No eyewitnesses, nothing directly tying it. Bottom line is he was found guilty, sentenced to a long prison term in a state correctional facility in Colorado. And, about 8-9 years ago, I read an article in the Denver Post that his conviction was overturned due to DNA evidence. And the state of Colorado paid him to compensate him for the years that he'd lost due to his conviction and prison sentence. So, disturbing, yes. And, it harkens back to my first year of law school when I was involved in the Innocence Project, which is a project that pursues cases where it looks like the person's been wrongly convicted. And at that time, DNA wasn't as, prominent as it is today. But, it's just, justice sometimes is not served. And that's just, the criminal justice system has some inherent challenges. And that case is a perfect example of those challenges. And again, how difficult it is both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney to know, again, that so much of a person's liberty hangs in the balance.
And not only that, is that it's, because we agree if you go to a jury trial, it's supposed to be 12 people of your peers. But the general public doesn't know the law. They don't know what exactly is evidence and what isn't evidence, just like where you said it was circumstantial, but there was no definites. So that's always been scary to me to have us any sort of, we all have weird phobias, right? Getting wrongfully convicted of something is like weirdly like spiders to me, like they are to my wife, right? That's weirdly. And that always, and that perspective, yeah, you happen to be part of that process that years later comes back and says, hey, no, this was wrong. This was, I can't imagine how much that just like, man, because do you ever think, because you were a prosecutor and a defense attorney or whatever, do you ever look back and like, how many times did I get it wrong? Or how many times did I get it right and they got away with it? Like both times. Do you ever, does any of that ever keep you up at night?
Yeah, it's just inherent in the work. And I think that's, one of the ways in which, lawyering is, it's not for the faint of heart. And, I think exposes you to so many frailties in, human judgment, right? Perception that is just that, it's just perception. And I think it also, though, it gives you a sense of, just the need to look at things from so many different angles and not just get, sort of fixated in one way, right? I think one of the best pieces of advice I got as a young lawyer is, you need to make the argument better than the other side will make it so that that perspective. And, I think that can serve you well throughout life to, suspend your immediate judgment and look at things from many different perspectives.
And I always tell people and look at me like I'm batshit crazy is like one of my favorite things is airplane crash documentaries, right? Because when you look at the process of how they determine what happened to an airplane, that's exactly what they do. It's not one single thing. It's not a bolt. It's not a this. They look, okay, so the pilot overslept and this happened. This is the chain of events. This is it. This is whatever, which is how my mind works. I'm a very logical person, right? And when I tell people that, they're like, well, why would you like that? I'm like, I just like that theory of having to look at it from many different angles. I think whether it be because of education or society or whatever, we tend to lead with emotion instead of logic. And then if you're on a jury, oh, that motherfucker guilty. Let's convict him. And then it's you as the lawyer trying to defend that. I can assure you, you're like, no, there's nothing here to say that he is. But you can tell the little ladies over there looking at him like, and you're just like, shit, he's going to jail. That's
yeah. And Ryan, I think you touch on it in terms of this, emotions always, there. We're human beings, and yet balancing that with logic and reason, right? It presents for the trial attorney, a great challenge, right? How do you blend both, right? And recognize that human beings, we tend to make decisions emotionally, and then we back it up with reason, right?
Right.
Confirmation bias is often the case. As we start to make a decision, then we start to look for all the facts, the reasons why we've gone that way.
Instead of the other way, which it should, which by any logical thinker ever should be the other way.
That's right.
So how many years were you in the trial lawyer sector of taking on these types of cases? How long of your life was that?
Yeah, it was an early part of my legal career, a small segment of it, but it started early. Actually, my second year of law school, so three-year law school. Second year, I was fortunate enough to get a position as a prosecutor in a municipality just north of Denver, and I was a paid position as an intern, but effectively handled so much of just the day-to-day, shoplifting, traffic cases, all that. And then went immediately to the DA's office in Northern Colorado in Fort Collins, and was there just over a year. So all told, roughly about 3 years, and then went into private practice. And it was natural that I would focus in the litigation investigations arena because I had all that experience.
Okay. One last question about your time, because then I want to move into your private practice and all of that. Over your time of prosecutor, defense in that 3 years, what is the one law you're like, this is bullshit and this shouldn't be illegal? Why are we wasting time with this?
Yeah, well, I'll say that, in the earliest days, I feel like the petty paraphernalia and cannabis crimes were just kind of ridiculous, and so no surprise there that I'm on the side of legalization, with a caveat, and that is that it's as traditional Chinese medicine and knows well that it's a dangerous substance in the sense of it's powerful, it's potent, it has addictive properties to it. But in terms of just, the automatic, minimum sentencing around cannabis crimes, absolutely ridiculous. And so many federal and state court judges blew the whistle. And I think that aided in the legalization that was I think the right way to go.
I think that's a big thing, too, because I've seen so many people get tanked and drive a car into a tree or whatever. And about the worst I've ever seen anybody that gets high do is they won't shut the fuck up about space. You're like, stop. I don't care about Jupiter anymore. Just stop.
That's right. And I've heard more than one bail bondsman say to me that, if it weren't for alcohol, they'd be out of business.
Yeah.
Right. People, just the crazy, insane things that we perpetuate in society with alcohol is nuts compared to the others. And
I think on it, it's a fairness level. Neither substance on a regular use is great. You shouldn't always have the mindset of if you use a substance daily, there might be an issue, whatever. But on the fairness level of seeing what alcohol did all those things, and like, why is weed illegal? I think even growing up, I was born in 1978, and just growing up to this, I'm like, why? I don't get it. So all right. So you move into private practice, right? Was it just that you had enough education that you could start your private practice? Was it a family business, but you just move into private practice?
Yeah, it was what I alluded to earlier. The realization that being on a salary, essentially, public servant salary, was going to be very challenging for me to pay down my student loans. It felt like within my lifetime, right? It would be decades before doing so, and knew that wanted to start a family. And in private practice, provided a path for higher income, and so that was definitely a big influence. And also at the time, my then wife, we were in different spots physically, literally. She was in downtown Denver practicing. She also a lawyer, and I was in northern Colorado, and it just wasn't going to work. She was committing to a position long term in Denver. And so I looked for an opportunity in Denver, and going into a firm made the most sense. And then I ended up progressing into one of the larger firms in the Rocky Mountain region in Denver, and challenging work. Right, I'm definitely a driven sort of person, and so I think I was drawn to very challenging work, which I found in spades. And, in certain respects, look back and think, how foolish all that drive and ambition was, but I learned a lot along the way.
So your wife's a lawyer too?
Yeah, my ex-wife. Yeah, at this point, yes.
Oh, well, yeah. I was going to say, how did the arguments go if you're both lawyers? But anyway, we can move on.
Yeah. That does lead to some heated arguments, to say the least.
I can just imagine, because, I'm very logical. Me and my wife will get to argue. She's like, you should have been a lawyer. And when you said my ex-wife or whatever I'm like, yeah, that to two of you, that'd have been great. So as you move into your private practice litigation, what was the stuff that you did there? What was your main day-to-day at your private practice?
Yeah, so it's in litigation where things go south and there's lawsuits, right? Mm-hmm. That can span everything from just what I was involved in. Even bankruptcy cases have a litigation element to mm-hmm. them. So in my earliest days, involved in the bankruptcy of Western Pacific Airlines, which was an airline in Colorado that went belly up. And then moved into probate litigation, where one of the earliest founders in the cable TV industry in Colorado amassed a fortune, and somebody came up with a claim of millions of dollars based on a handwritten note, that things like that, digging in to find out, is this true? And it clearly was not true. Things like that, and for me, very much diving into the facts, how does that match up with the law? And then proceeding with everything around what's known as the discovery process, leading to, typically, right, trial. Although so many cases, particularly in the bigger cases, they don't end up at trial, right? They end up getting settled, or there's some other resolution to the case, typically a settlement. But the ones that I found most fascinating were those ones where piecing together the facts and interviewing essentially people through the course of what's known as a deposition, right, where you're asking the person questions about, what about this check, what about this? And I really enjoyed that aspect of it, because you're somewhat telling a story through the course of that testimony that mm-hmm. Then down the road, if the person's not being completely truthful, it's going to be very challenging for them later because of what they're sharing with you now.
I heard the number one cause of memory loss is depositions. That's
it's an uncomfortable experience for many, and it takes, I think, a certain type to do very well at depositions.
I don't recall. Yeah, every deposition I have ever seen I don't recall. Yeah, right? Yeah. Because that's not lying. Like how we can't see inside your brain. Did you ever have any sort of Perry Mason moment of you found a piece in discovery that like changed the course of everything?
In that probate case that I mentioned, there was some handwritten notes that were alleged to be written by the deceased. and then just discovering, I forget what it was, but something in the deceased personal records that completely refuted this, handwritten note that the deceased was alleged to have written. That was very gratifying because, the whole thing was a scheme. It was a scam. And it was great to have some hard evidence that showed that it was.
So after your private practice, what was next for you after that private practice?
Well,
what was the next
evolution?
evolution?
I actually, as I said, I moved into a very large law firm in Denver, Colorado, which, while very attractive initially, because the salary and bonus opportunity was just so much more significant than certainly public service. It grew tired of it pretty darn quickly. It wasn't the right fit for me. This particular firm had, I soon discovered, a pretty luxe lounge. You have big screen TV, stocked freezer, and a fridge, and all of that. Barca loungers, but only for lawyers. It was literally known as the lawyer's lounge. So I'd see, legal assistants and others, walking by the hallway looking in. And I'd be in there like, yeah, exactly. And it's just, I just thought this doesn't agree with me. So I actually
just made you feel like the asshole. Yeah,
it did. Yeah. The old boys club is an understatement. That's certainly how I felt, even though there were female lawyers in the firm and lots of legal staff, just had that air. And also then this, Ryan, lawyering in those big firms in particular is it's a competition for who can work the most.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah,
that's the whole thing, and that became very real for me because as a driven person, then I'm kind of I'm on that hamster wheel of chasing the most amount of hours. Why? Because then you're going to be looked on favorably, and you're also going to get the highest bonus at the end of the year. So that didn't sit with me too well, even though I was very much attracted by all that come along with it, right? The income, the prestige. But it just, after a couple of years, I was done. And then 9/11 happened. And the day before 9/11 happened, I was that weekend working in the law firm. And 9/11 really, had even though I was all the way out in Denver, Colorado, it hit me very hard thinking, here I am the weekend before working on the 30th floor of a high rise in Denver, Colorado. The last thing I wanted is to think that, that might be, if that had been me, right, what a sorry state of affairs that was. So that was the beginning of the end for me. And within roughly a year, I just, rose the white flag and opted out and moved to Northwest Colorado to change everything for me and my wife at the time and our new 1-year-old child moved to a small mountain resort ski town in Northwest Colorado because I'd had enough of that big law firm lifestyle.
Well, I was going to ask because because I'm not a lawyer, I don't even play one on TV, that everything that I've seen, is legal drama, this or that. And that's a culture that almost every one of them portray, is that it's like this competition to sell your soul. The more of your soul you will sell the company, the more partner you'll make, the better you'll do. There's cutthroat, there's kneecapping each other, there's doing all of that. Now, I'm sure just like every business has a different culture. Every law firm is going to have a different culture. But is there anything prevalent that you've seen from law firm to law firm that is just the same across the board?
Yeah, this will in certain respects oversimplifies and simplify and generalize, right? So I'll say that right up front. There are some phenomenal lawyers out there, right? When you need a great lawyer, they're there, and yet I would, from my experience, particularly with these big mega firms, right? That greed very much starts to take over, and and it's so subtle, but it's very real, right? It's profits per partner. That's what these law firms are driven by. And so, ensuring that the system below it feeds up to that profits per partner is the name of the game. And again, not that there aren't incredibly smart people, working at these firms. It's just my experience of it turned me off to that. And then we'll get to this in a minute. I founded a very disruptive business. Disrupted to who? To those very large law firms that I, got the crosshairs of. And they attempted to throw me under the bus more than a handful of times because, I shifted, right? I left that world. I escaped to a dream job, which is to work as a risk manager, in-house lawyer at Steamboat Ski Resort in beautiful Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And yet I was pulled back into the legal world. And that's when I moved as a corporate lawyer inside of a Fortune 500 that was wrapped up in Enron and Arthur Andersen. And when I went in-house, then I was in a position to have some influence on how the law firms were billing this legal part of this Fortune 500. Yeah. And that led me down a path of a 10-year run where I founded my own firm to help essentially stem in my experience, the just gratuitous billing and at times just the bullshit fleecing of these corporations under the auspices of, well, we're your law firm. We need to meet our ethical obligation. And I could see right below it that, it was greed fueling the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So basically you're now kneecapping greedy law firms that try to overbill people that are unethically taking money from clients.
Yes. And they would say, oh no, we'd say the opposite. No, we're meeting our ethical obligation. And the way this showed up for me directly is that, I saw a problem, which was this, mushroom of electronic data, right? This is circa 2004, 2005, 2006, when, investigators, other lawyers started to realize, oh, we don't need to be looking at boxes stored in a record center right now to find out what happened 6 months ago. We need to look at the BlackBerry, right? Pre-iPhone, right? We need to look at the server because that's where you're going to get what matters most. And so that's the area that I focused on. And in the earliest days, that these law firms, their solution to it, many of them was, oh, just print it out, print everything out. We'll just review it manually. Oh my God, that's absurd, right?
Right.
And so bringing technology to help solve that problem by, more rapidly locating the data, analyzing it using technology, doing things like this would result in less of those documents going to the outside law firm to review. And the outside law firm did not like that because this was turning into a gravy train for them that me and a group of others, started to say, hey, there's a better way to do this. And, I think it's pretty well known, the legal industry is one of the last to, adopt technology and look for progressive ways to make things more efficient.
Well, isn't there a technique in law to where they just bury you in paperwork anyway? Is 100%. That, okay, I don't want you to find the line item on page 76. So here's 74,000 pages of something.
That's right.
Good luck. Right.
That's right. That's right.
And then the tech, what that does is it catalogs things to where you can absolutely find that line that you're looking for without that money. So, I mean, on both hands, it makes people understand that they're not going to be able to hide what they hid. And it also makes the other law firms not be able to just bleed the client dry.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. So that was gratifying for me because I'd been at one of those law firms and I knew how the game goes in terms of the more you bill, the better off everybody is. Right. And again, this comes across as very cynical, but I'm just sharing my experience and it's not uncommon. Right. All you have to do is go on, Google or LinkedIn and run some searches to find lawyers that have seen exactly what I'm describing. And then there are these very heroic lawyers that had taken some big corporations to task And they've had to deal with exactly what you described, getting buried. And beyond that, getting, ethical complaints and their careers ruined because they stand up for what they believe is just.
And you still have more in your journey. This isn't where you ended, correct?
No.
So what's after? What's next?
Yeah, what's after is, I saw this opportunity as a lawyer inside of Fortune 500 that there needed to be a better solution to this problem of growing electronic data. And fortunately, I was tasked with that as a in-house lawyer. So I, went out to Silicon Valley, found technology, and me and a team of forensics folks and other lawyers, we developed a better process, a better mousetrap to find the data more quickly, so that law firms, would have to leverage this, and the corporation could then, reduce how much it was spending. And founded a firm that grew pretty darn quickly because I had a couple of corporations that I've been working with, including the one that I'd just been a lawyer at, that we were saving millions of dollars a quarter of reducing outside legal spend. So I knew that there was a lot of opportunity, right, in the market. And then 2008 financial crisis hits. And that was an experience, right? The retraction that we've seen even post-COVID. And that was an experience as a, small company. I'd taken, an SBA loan, had vouched my house to grow the business. And that was like this, entrepreneurship is no easy feat, particularly when, I had growing payroll demands and yet, we continued to grow. And yet I started to get conflicted about what? That I started to find myself just chasing more for the sake of more, just growing the business to grow it bigger and bigger. And I turned down a couple of early offers to sell the business for several $1 million, right, within a couple of years of founding the firm. And ultimately, I started to burn out in a big way, right? I lost sight of why I'd started the business to begin with. And November 3rd, 2012, I hit bottom very, very hard. And that was a real wake-up call for me, because I realized in that moment that if I didn't right myself, there was a risk the business would slide into oblivion. And I'm grateful for that, dark night of the soul, because it allowed me and inspired me and challenged me to turn everything around in the way I was leading my life and my lifestyle, in ways that, the business got back on track because I got back on track. And I resolved in that dark place to stop chasing more for more, the sake of more, and make peace with the fact that, I needed to put my best back into a business and have that business flourish in some way without me involved with it. That there was some point I had to exit this business, and I had to get ready to do so, because it was growing in certain respects bigger than we at that point. We had the capacity to grow that business, and it all, I like to say, by a combination of grit, perhaps more grace. That's exactly what happened over a couple of years, and ultimately sold the business and had a great exit, what I call a dream exit from the business, that allowed me to go back and spend more time with my family. My kids were at an age where I wanted to spend more time with them. And so sort of had that whole cycle, Ryan, of, founding a business, growing it, suffering, hitting a plateau, backsliding, and then successfully exiting.
And that's your new company, and that's what you help people do now, correct?
That's right. That's right. The Dream Exit Collective is very much focused on helping business owners. First and foremost, just what I experienced, right? If you want to maximize the value of the business, in my experience, and I see with my clients, you got to optimize your own leadership and lifestyle in order to maximize. You can continue to get along to go along and have a nice business, but if you really want to maximize that and you want to see the business flourish beyond your involvement, you got to start with optimizing your leadership and your lifestyle, and then you can get into the nuts and bolts of the business to maximize its value.
Absolutely, because anytime that you're a leader of a business, right? Anytime that that business reflects you, and whether it's the captain of a ship, the CEO of a company, school bus driver, whatever it is, whenever you're in charge on whatever level of leadership you're at, you influence everything around you. And just like you said, there's been times in my businesses to where I'm burnt out, I'm done, I don't want to do it, I'm drinking too much, whatever it is. And that reflects in every way of the business. And then at a certain point, you either get fired, you lose your business, or you figure your shit out and go the right way. Right?
That's right. And I was doing the same thing, Ryan, to cope. I was, misusing alcohol, not like, that I wasn't functional. Mm-hmm. But I was misusing alcohol, and then I had periods of deep dark depression. I was diagnosed depressed. I got on Zoloft, and I was just kind of coping, right? And that's no way to lead a thriving business. No, it's just not.
No, if you don't love what you're doing, at least on some level, I think you're doing the wrong thing.
That's right.
It's going back. I didn't have the linear path to business, right? I was a high school dropout. I was a factory worker, truck driver, and then I got educated, and then I got into business. And I can remember those nights on the factory floor of I would have died in there. I would have whatever. And then I almost feel like now when I have a job or I'm doing something or a client, and whenever I hear that while I'm doing them, it's time for me to go. It's time for that to be done. And I think we all have to recognize that as we look at businesses as plasticky, A to B to C, we were talking logically, but your heart still has to be in what you're doing. And if you're not, and if you don't, that's where you come in, is help me figure out how to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And my experience, I was not 100% into it, and the business owner basically ran me over, and it's just getting very, very clear, right, about what's the future of the business, what's my future, and then if it's an interim, right, you still may loathe the business, maybe you just can't even stand it, but you better get aligned with something that's pulling you forward. Otherwise, as you described, the outcome's going to be pretty ugly, and that's a very risky proposition for most entrepreneurs, because if it's a business that's grown to any size, that's going to be one of the most significant financial assets that either turns into a positive asset or turns into a complete financial meltdown. And so there's a lot at stake for entrepreneurs. And I think it's easy to ignore the obvious until you're either, hit between the eyeballs, or you come to a dark moment like I did.
Have you ever, when somebody says, "Hey, help me exit my business," have you ever showed up or had that call and went, "Nope, you're too far gone. This is not going to work"?
Yeah. There, it's. I think it's more and I can relate, because I did this for months upon months and even years at times. Just had my head so far in the sand, and those are the ones that, if there's not at least some level of awareness and appreciation, that's not much you can do, right? It's no sales job that's going to help somebody get their head out of the sand, and yet that's what it takes. I think is a real triggering event to say, I got to wake up, right? Because there's so much at stake.
So as you do successful exits, that's another show that one of our co-hosts do, as you do the Dream Exit Collective. And you said it allows you to spend more time with your family and life. How does that differ from when you were practicing law? What's that turnaround of being able to do this versus that?
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind. One is that it's that what we were talking about. Being aligned with work that's very purposeful, that feels like this is the service I want to render, right? That there's something very meaningful about the work innately from me, right? As opposed to I'm just being carried forward by the carrot of more money or prestige, right? That's a big difference. This work is so much more gratifying, rewarding innately, because it's been my experience, right? And it's not unlike, being a guide out on a trail, right? I've been down this path, I've seen certain pitfalls, and I want to point those out and help others navigate, right? And then the other is just, in my experience, just the drudgery, right? Of feeling compelled to just work more hours because that's the expectation. That's a game changer, right? I feel like life's too short.
Yeah, because I had this boss that I hated. To this day, I think if I see him in a bar, I'd punch him in his fat mouth. But every now and then he said something to me, and it still resonates to me to this day. And I remember it was one of those jobs, and I was just throwing time at it. I wasn't throwing any skill. I wasn't throwing anything else. I was just throwing more time at it. And he said, this isn't going to work. He said, throwing more time at something doesn't work. Throwing skill at it works. He goes, this is not the industry that you're in. And I hated this dude, right? So anything he said was just bullshit when it came out of his mouth. And that kept me up for days. Like I'm sitting there thinking, and I'm like, so now I got married last year again. And I'm like, nope, at 5 o'clock, I'm done. This happens. I go to soccer games. I do this, I do that. I make sure and hit those markers because no matter what my business is, no matter how this is, I have to rely on me, my family, my mental health, my health, all of those things. And no job is worth that to me anymore.
Yeah. And my experience, I saw how, before I hit this rock bottom moment, I was doing exactly what I was just in the ways checking the clock, right. And just time. And what I discovered was that I actually was doing a disservice to the business. Why? Because I was just, occupying a seat without really driving things forward in an aligned way. And what ended up happening, Ryan, was I ended up working less in the business because I set a much clearer vision for everybody. I delegated and trusted others to basically cultivate leadership within the team in ways that allowed me to step back, spend more time with my family, and also recharge the batteries so that I was showing up at my best a lot more often. And I think that's counterintuitive for a lot of young business owners, right? You just think, I got to do it all. Right? You're closest to the problem, so you think you have a solution to every problem, when the reality is this business ain't going to ever really scale successfully if you don't trust others.
That's right, because the business is you. So if you have a heart attack, there goes your business. If you break your leg, there goes your business.
And nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to buy it.
Because if you're broken, it's broken. That's generally it. All right. So Don, thank you so much for the conversation, man. This has been amazing, just your journey from where you were to where you are now. So I got one more question. What's next? What's next for you? Yes.
Yeah. What's next for me? This journey I've been on, I've had a manuscript sitting for 4+5 years that I'm picking back up to share with others in a way that, I had some books that really changed things for me, and looking forward to having that serve others in the same way.
Well, how do we get a hold of you? How do we check out your business? How do we just get to know you better? We got like a 40-minute slice of Don here. If we want the whole pie, what do we do?
Yeah, best way, Ryan, is thedreamexit.com. Easy enough, thedreamexit.com, or on social. Don McLaughlin Jr. is the best way to connect with me. And it's been a real pleasure, talking with you, Ryan. And, I love entrepreneurship. I see it as, next to, artists and other creatives, it is that area of life that, there's so much innovation and problem solving. And so in that way, I feel grateful to be part of others' entrepreneurs' journeys.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. This has been, if I do it right, this has been Business Uncensored, brought to you by Titan Media Works. Hey, do you want a podcast, get to babble into a microphone just like this one? Well, that's where I come in. We have a made for you out of the box solution to podcasting, professional editing. Look, we don't make it look like a Zoom meeting. Everybody in the world has been traumatized by Zoom meetings and team meetings. Your podcast should not look like one of them if you want it to look professional and well produced, just like this piece of art. Thank you, Isaac. Call us, TitanMediaWorks.com. I'm sure we put it on the screen in the show notes somewhere, or Ryan at TitanMediaWorks.com to get a hold of me directly. Thank you once again, Don. And I'd love you to come back if I got any legal questions or just to talk about stories and stuff.
Love to.
All right. Thanks so much. Until next time.